including the differently disabled, to voice their emotions uninhibitedly. We are fortunate today to have with us distinguished theatre director, Mr.Feisal Alkazi. Mr. Alkazi is an author, activist, educationist, and a counsellor. He has carved his own niche with his group, RUCHIKA, which has produced more than 200 plays in English, Urdu, and Hindi. Two of his plays, Noor and A Quiet Desire, have been widely acclaimed. Faisal also works extensively on heritage education in Delhi, Jaipur, Srinagar, and Hyderabad, and initiates projects that culminate in a book. He has authored more than 20 books, and his book, Rang Biranga Rang Manch, has sold 50,000 copies, in fact, more than 50,000 copies, and the count goes on. Faisal is also a counsellor with Sanjeevani, and he has produced more than 30 films and directed 5 plays on disability. Thank you, Faisal. We're really fortunate to have you with us this evening. Faisal inspires children to adopt theatre as a profession. And today we have Alpna Manchanda's son, Pranay, who is a stage actor and has been Faisal's student for a number of years. Alpna is our moderator for today's webinar. Alpna has been with VIDYA since 2000 as a volunteer and has contributed considerably towards the growth of the organization. She has been ex-executive creative director with MRM McCann and Wonder Man, two of the world's largest digital advertising agencies. Today, she's an independent digital advertising consultant. Welcome, Alpna. I'd also like to welcome all the attendees for today's webinar. There is just one housekeeping rule. Please put your questions in the question and answer section and not in the chat box. The excitement is mounting. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, over to Faisal for the wonderful world of children's theatre.
So very good evening to all of you, and it's my pleasure to be with you. I've been a teacher educator for the last 30 plus years, and I've had a great occasion to work with Mrs. Kalsi in many of her earlier avatars when she's worked with different organizations in leading roles. I want to plunge you all into 3 separate images which come to mind immediately when I think of the whole process of the child and theatre, drama. And I'd like you just to think about them before I start on what I'm going to say. Maybe about 20 years ago, I'd done a beautiful production of Aladdin, you know, the all-time favorite, children's favorite, at Sri Ram Center in Delhi. It's a large auditorium, about a 500-seater auditorium. And for that particular production, I worked with adults acting for children. So it was adults performing on the stage and largely a child audience, with, of course, their parents alongside. And it's a large theater in Delhi with an aisle running down the middle right to the edge of the stage. And to my fascination and interest, I was in the lighting booth at the back of the auditorium. A young boy, he may have been about 5 years old, he just got up from the seat that he was in and he walked down this aisle right to the edge of the stage. And because the stage is not very high, maybe not even 2 feet off the auditorium floor, he just put his hands like so and stood over there and watched the entire play. So his distance from the actors was maybe about 2 or 3 feet. And this was before the interval, and the audience was delighted that this child was so immersed in this world of Aladdin. And we reached the interval, the curtain came down, and I went backstage. And one of the actresses who was playing the Princess Yasmin in Aladdin, she said, "Faisal, what to do? This child is there, he's distracting me." I said, "No, nothing of the sort. He's having the time of his life. and work around that particular issue. Sure enough, Act 2 started, the curtain went up, and back he was, watching all the action on the stage again. And he stayed there completely delighted by what he was seeing and experiencing. And as at the end of the show, we invited people backstage to come and interact with the characters that were there. This boy was among the first to clamber up on stage and go running to Princess Yasmin, who he was fascinated by. And he whipped out, at that time, those tiny little autograph books that many kids carried, and he gave it to her. Now, the actress, without much thinking, was ready to write her own name, and I just stopped her and said, "No, Meera, hold on over there. Why don't you just write with best wishes from Princess Yasmin?" So this was one idea of how the entire world of imagination becomes so real to the very young child. And the child engages with theatre that he sees on the stage, as he does very often with TV, with a complete immersion into that particular world. So I want you to move directly from here. I'm going to cut to another image. I was doing a workshop maybe about 4 or 5 years ago with students drawn from Delhi schools under the auspices of INTAC, the Indian National Trust for Art and Cultural Heritage. And we were exploring the monuments of Delhi through the process of theatre. And then one of the children piped up and said, "Sir, we always learn about the slave dynasty. And we learn about this Kutubuddin Aibak and the other kings who came after. They're all called slaves. What does that mean?" I said, "Let's try it." And I said, "What are the words that come to mind linked with slave?" And we came up with words. And I said, "Now just move around this space. And as I say the words, you just freeze." So my word may be power, freeze in a position of power, king, freeze in a position of king, submission, freeze in that place. So they created just this little landscape, perhaps in their minds, maybe a mindscape. And from that, I got them to develop just 3 frozen frames, which would explain how a slave became a king. And by entering into the shoes, stepping into somebody else's shoes, and particularly in a process of history understanding and internalization, theatre was a beautiful technique for them to step into what must it have been like in the 12th century in Delhi to be a slave who's sold one day in the marketplace, where you're testing their muscles and how brainy they are and what they're doing. And slowly this person rising up in the ranks as maybe Altamash or Balban did and become the Sultan of Delhi. So this was a very interesting way, again, of using theatre here, perhaps totally as an educational tool, not as a product, but certainly as a process. And then I'd like to give you a third image. I've done many plays with kids with disability, as Mrs. Kalsi just shared with you. And the very first time I did a play was with a new NGO in Jaipur called Disha. And we decided to just dramatize the quite well-known Panchatantra story of the rabbit and the lion who dominates the jungle. And then the rabbit outwits him by getting him to look at his reflection in the well, and he jumps in, and that's the end of the lion, that the great dictator. So I remember 2 days before the show, we all decided that we needed 2 days on the stage with the kids. It was a first experience. It was a cast of 110 children, of whom 85 of them were wheelchair bound, and children who would never speak in their lives. But they were a very integral part of our play, as plants, as trees, as animals, as birds. They were there in their wheelchairs. And the first time we went onto the stage for a dress rehearsal, this young mentally challenged boy, about 11 years old, he tightly held on to my finger as we got off the bus, and he took me down and onto the center of the stage. It was a big stage in Jaipur, the Ravindra Rangshala, again a formal theatre. So we were standing in the middle of the stage, me and this young boy, and there were all the seats in front of us, maybe about 600-700 seats. And he said, "Faisal uncle, for the last 4 years, I've sat in that seat," and he pointed to something in maybe G or H row on the aisle. "And my brother has been here on the stage. Tomorrow, he will be sitting there and I will be on the stage." So just the power of that simple statement by this child, who never had an occasion till that time to actually step on a stage and be seen by a vast audience and receive that adulation, receive that praise, receive that moment in the spotlight. which is so much a part of our growing up process and has so much to do with our ideas of self-affirmation and self-worth. So that's another completely different angle of theatre as a means of confidence building in the child. And I think all of you all will understand what I'm saying, because for each one of us, what do we remember of our school years? We don't remember the Sanskrit marks or not doing very well in maths, but we do remember those occasions when we climbed up on the stage, either to perform ourselves or to receive some kind of award, and turning away from the chief guest and into the audience at that time and receiving the applause of many people. So theatre is all these things and more for a child, whether the child is 3.5 or 4 years old, or whether the child is 16 or 17 in the last years of school. Theatre can play a formidable role. And I'm not talking today about teaching a child how to act, because I don't think there's a need. They're very good actors by themselves, but teaching them how to play with the material. So let's just enter now from these 3 fine examples. The first being the boy watching Aladdin, the second being the children interacting with the theme of the slave dynasty, and the third being the challenge boy in Jaipur going up on stage for the first time. So today the approach that is really used across the world in the area of child drama is one of playmaking. We no longer think only of that scripted formal play, which many of us associate with the idea of drama, because schools tend to focus just on this one big annual production, which involves lots of children. But now we think of playmaking as a tool. It's a process. We're learning something along the way. So it's a structured fashion which explores the experience, the feelings, the attitudes, thoughts, and ideas of children in the classroom, and uses these as the raw material for building a play. So the play is entirely built by the children themselves. It is improvised in a way, and hence we use this word improvisation. The purpose of such an activity is educational. It helps the child explore his and her own world imaginatively. And just to understand this concept of the play, I'm going to take you back to really the dictionary definition of it. So the Oxford Dictionary says play, and I think you should listen carefully to this, play as free activity or as movement in general. Play is the carrying out of something which is not to be taken seriously, but is done merely in sport or in frolic. To engage in a game is to play it. To perform dramatically is to play on a musical instrument, again the use of the word play, and in the study of children's drama and children's play, each and every form of this is explored. So for a child, play takes 4 very specific purposes. It allows the child to make contact with his or her environment. It's the same social purpose as work has for us as adults. The second, it makes a bridge between the child and his emotional experience. The third is, it's an externalized experience of emotion as art. And fourth, play completely as enjoyment and as rest. So these are the 4 functions of play that we can use in the school. So what does the child get from participating? I think, first of all, a tremendous sense of enjoyment. At the widest sense, play means a sense of exhilaration and enjoyment. For childhood is a time of playing, as we all know, whether with peers, their friends, pets, adults, or with real life itself. And it's through this process of play that the child discovers and experiences the world in a structured manner, step by step. There are a wide range of other benefits, of course, that you're all aware of as teachers and educators yourself. Drama provides an outlet for self-expression. It helps the development of imagination, creativity, and artistic awareness. It increases social and mental awareness. It enhances the child's fluency of speech and of expression, leading to self-knowledge, self-respect, and most important of all, self-confidence. Drama creates and fosters its own sense of discipline. It gives children the opportunity to learn how to cooperate with other children and helps develop orderly thinking and the ability just to organize. Children very quickly learn how to cooperate together with a team to create a finished product in a limited period of time. It requires skills of listening, problem solving, time management. It develops their initiative, and certainly it fosters resourcefulness. So physical coordination, physical fitness, therapeutic aspect that theatre could often have. It could have a cathartic effect if we use psychodrama. It provides social and moral training. It helps young people to mature emotionally, and I'll give many examples of this in a minute, preparing them in a very real, though playful way for the complex roles that they would play in adult life. It provides a wonderful way for bright but non-academically minded children and gives opportunities to excel to those children on whom society may tend to force low expectations for reasons of prejudice linked to their class, their caste, or their ability. So the sensitive drama teacher in a school takes the child through a process of discovery, beginning with the opening up repertory exercises, leading into drama exploration, and finally into creating a work of art. In drama exploration, themes are explored by students playing a role using a variety of participatory theatre devices. The process is for themselves. It is not audience-driven. But that's only one aspect of drama as we use it in school. Of course, we also use it as a medium to teach content, and I will give you 3 beautiful examples on this aspect of drama in education in a minute. I think if you look age-wise, it's interesting to see that children at different ages are fascinated and willing to explore theatrically various different themes. Children under 5, as we all know, are getting their feet very firmly placed on the ground. Their world is a realistic one. Beyond the immediate family, they begin recognizing the policeman, the doctor, the postman, the soldier, the teacher, sometimes even Miss Universe. So you see this child play acting these roles over and over within the house itself. So there's the young boy or girl shooting away with a toy gun in imitation of what they've seen on TV, setting up house under a table, playing at being mother and father. And for this age group, another fascination is the spoken word, which may be either real language or even nonsense language. For him or her, rhythm and repetition are delightful. Characters with funny names, faces and voices, animal characters with human characteristics, as there's so much in our Panchatantra stories, nonsense rhymes, all captivate their interest. The naughty child, the giving away of a secret, people who constantly fall down or make stupid mistakes, these are their pet themes. The child who's lost or left alone can generate a very real fear in the eyes of a child under 5. But the next stage, as we all know, is the realm of fairy tale or fantasy, the fascination of the 7 and 8-year-old with life on other planets, time machines, Harry Potter, magic, myth. The child has become to be safe now with unreal and frightening characters who often generate in the child that lovely feeling of delicious fear, sometimes somewhere between laughter and a real kind of fear. The moral values of the family become important to the child, and stories around a change of circumstance from rags to riches, like in Cinderella or Aladdin or Oliver Twist, find favor. They love the naughty prankster monkey from the Panchatantra who outwits the stupid crocodile. The comic banter and nonsense of Akbar and Birbal, these are all favorites for this age group. And then we come to the heroic years, 9 to 11, with the boys being drawn to stories of heroes, historical and imaginary, and girls drawn more to women heroines. For the first time, one begins to see a kind of segregation of interests according to gender. And here too, the child's sense and interest of history is most apparent. She has both an idea of and an interest in the days gone by. So the child is moved from the present and stepped both into the past and into the future. By the age of 12, as you all know, the child is ready to participate in stories of idealism, characters who fight tremendous odds, as for instance, Anne Frank, which I recently did with 11 to 13-year-olds. For people who are searching for the truth to further a cause, they have complete sympathy with the pre-adolescent. A child can concentrate for longer periods. They're interested in the backstage areas. Abstractions are completely acceptable. Contemporary life fascinates them and its dilemmas. The lonely child, the relationships between parents, relationships with their own sibling. So these become the complexity of issues that the child is marked from the transition from childhood into adolescence and then into adulthood. What unites all of these age groups together is the ability to enter into the imaginary world with no self-consciousness on the part of the child. Becoming a character is central to the entire experience of theatre. And here, in a safe setting, children can act out their innermost fantasies. And in this way, they watch a portion of themselves acting out their desires. So the imaginative experience becomes an extremely satisfying one. In the same way as identifying with the bad or antisocial allows the child to experience badness and purge it through punishment, you hear the screams and the howls of delight that often greet a villain getting his just deserts in a children's theatre performance. So I'd like you now to move into a situation where we begin to see that here we've talked about using children's theatre and the age specific and a focus on the process much more than the product itself. So let's think, how do we actually do some of these things in the classroom with children? And I'd like to share with you 3 examples drawn from my work and from the work of my colleagues. I think a big issue that exercises us as teachers is the issue of bullying in the classroom. I think a lot of us battle, and teachers often feel when they enter a space such as theatre that they may not have a great amount of skills. So I'm just going to talk about the subject of bullying and how teachers with varied level of skills vis-a-vis theatre are able to approach this, okay? So one teacher, very timid and not very sure how he was going to approach this theme with children, was helped along by this poem. And it's a poem that you'll find interesting. I'll share it with you. It's by a British poet called John Foster. 4 o'clock Friday, I'm home at last. Time to forget the week that has passed. On Monday at break, they stole my ball and threw it over the playground wall. On Tuesday morning, I came in late, but they were waiting behind the gate. On Wednesday afternoon, in games, they threw mud at me and called me names. Yesterday, they laughed after the test because my marks were lower than the rest. Today, they trampled my books on the floor and I was kept back in school because I swore. 4 o'clock Friday, at last I'm free. For 2 whole days, they can't get at me. What a beautiful poem expressing the feelings of a child who's being bullied in school. And I think this using poetry, there's so many beautiful examples, many of which are in our textbooks themselves, can open up a whole discussion with children on ideas to do with bullying and what happens there. As an alternative, another teacher who I was working with decided to write a diary entry in the first person. What was the child feeling who was being bullied? So he just imaginatively wrote out a first person narrative and then wrote a first person narrative also of the child who was bullying, the bullier in a way. Okay? So just these 2 points of view between these 2 sets of children and their compulsions, how they were feeling, entering into their shoes, led to a beautiful sense of set of improvisations done by the children themselves. A third teacher, even more timid about stepping into the theatre space, said, let's start with this. Let's start with the children enacting a scene where the parents phone the school to complain about a bullied child. Okay? And here we have the different children taking that phone call. So the teacher is the parents saying, hello, principal. I've had this experience with my son yesterday. And children by turn play the person in the position of power to deal and field with these questions. Another way that's very effective is the idea that we use in theatre of hot seating. We place a chair and we say, imagine that this child is the child who's being bullied. Now I want you to stand as students in the class in different positions in this room in relation to this child who's sitting on the chair. And one thing, depending on how close you are, the mother may be very close, very protective, and she may think out a sentence which involves, I'm very worried about my son dropping out of school because the bullying is so terrible. You may have somebody a little further away, one of the other kids in the class saying, I don't know why Ramesh does nothing to beat up the child who's beating him up. You may have some child even standing further away, maybe the person who's just running the canteen in the school, who's seen this child often being bullied, and his or her attitude towards this entire thing. Okay? So just in creating these circles around the child, we're getting a chance to explore. Each child just saying a single line to this empty chair, which is embodying the bullied child. And through that, one can explore the entire process of bullying. Okay? So after doing this, we can reverse it and say, now in the child is the bully. So what does the mother think? Maybe she turns away. She doesn't even know that a child is involved in bullying. Maybe the person in the shop knows that this is the bully and says, hey, piche hatna, don't behave with him like this. Okay? So the question is, how do we resolve these issues? How do we begin to get children to see the justice? And believe you me, children understand justice completely. So it may be bullying, it may be stealing. Of course, we always know the famous improvisations we've all enjoyed doing with children in school. The big thing at one time were those scented erasers which children had in their geometry boxes, and how some children would steal from the others. So I did a series of improvisations around this scented eraser. And then, of course, the big one is cheating in the exams. That conversation before, some child has got that little para in his pocket, somebody stuck something at the bottom of shoe, somebody says, I'll never do it, somebody who's very moralistic. And just those different points of view are leading us into a beautiful discussion on themes as difficult as bullying, cheating, stealing, etc. in the classroom. Okay? And then we can think about picking up something very different. I remember very many years ago, maybe about 25 years ago, Delhi Public School in Delhi, Mathura Road branch, was heading towards their annual day. And they knew that I was supposed to be good at play making with children. So they invited me to work with their class 11 on creating a piece. It would be part of the big annual day, which is on the huge City Fort stage, which some of you all know, which seats 2,000 people. And I started with nothing. I started with nothing at all. It was a time in our country where many of us were involved in the Narmada Bachao Andolan, and so many tribals had got displaced. So I just said, come with something from home for the children. There were 19 of them working with me. Bring something from home, some news item, something you've read, something that belongs to you, something that belongs to the household, which you think is crucial to this understanding of the subject, because our topic was forever homeless, with a question mark, forever homeless. The next day I was very excited because one girl brought a little battered kind of a bartan, a little kind of cooking vessel, and said, as the mother of a child and migrating from here, moving away, because the government is taking over the land, they're building this dam over here, I want to just carry my food stuff in this particular thing. So I have this bartan. Somebody else brought a news item. So the news item was actually the range of people, the lakhs of people who would be displaced. Somebody else said, I think I'm maybe the person who's in the construction business. So my big question is, how do I move people away from this damn site? The fourth one said, I want to think as an activist. I've got all these pictures of the many rallies that were happening across India at that time on Narmada Bachao, and I'm an NGO activist, and I'm going to view it from this point of view. So we just started accumulating images, talking, thinking, writing, occasionally putting down things. And we created, I must say, quite a masterful 25-minute play, at the end of which there was not a dry eye in that huge City Fort auditorium. So it was really a very powerful experience. And I wanted to share with you a poem that during the process of playmaking, what one of the children wrote and how completely from the inside out she'd understood it. So I want to share this with you. This is one of the few texts, I think maybe the only text that I used. I largely realized it through movement and music and compositions on the stage. And then this is a poem that we use right towards the end, which of course was done by a child, live on stage. Everything that I had, all that was left of me, all of it, finished. Nothing left. I feel weak, drained of all my strength. Once again, I am homeless. Torn clothes, dirty hair, a tear in my eye. I walk on the pavement, penniless. I'm not the first or the last who's been left homeless. I am the homeless. Do you recognize me? I am the helpless. Will you help me? So beautiful take, so suitable in today's India with the migrant workers going home over the last 2 months. This poem could have been written by any one of them, but this is just a 16-year-old child at DPS writing something on the plight of the homeless in a workshop with me maybe about 25 years ago. In a similar way, and perhaps something you're more familiar with, and many of you all use in your classrooms, is the idea of using theatre to teach some of the content which is there in your curriculum. And I remember a beautiful piece done years ago by a colleague of mine, Anamika Haksar, where she explored the whole world of the solar system and the planets with very young children, positioning them as the planets and the moons. So whether you are Mars or Pluto or Earth or Saturn, she just created in movement, and then the children wrote their own verses and understood the idea of the solar system in all its complexity. And then, of course, I often go into this area of trying to understand the whole world of the teenager. And I have these 6 wonderful words, all starting with the sound per in English and in Hindi, which really resonate with kids and get them going on improvisational themes. So I'd like to start with sharing those with you. Padhai, studies, pesha, an occupation, parents, very difficult for the elder teenager, peers or friends, pesa, and perhaps most crucial in their lives, pyar. So I'd just like to leave you with these few thoughts because I know Alpna is going to open us up to questions, and happy to take questions from you all. I've just given you an idea of how I've explored the world of theatre with children.
Very illuminating, Faisal. But I always knew this about you because my children have benefited a lot from doing theatre with you. I think
you
right
want to
from
share about Pranay? You want to share how Pranay came to me and now what he is?
Yes, my son started off as a adult shy child, and the teacher told me that he doesn't talk to any adult, which was true. He didn't speak with any adults, even at home, except his parents and probably his grandmothers. So I think it was we had this discussion at home, and my daughter had heard it, and she saw this newspaper ad about Faisal's workshops for children. And I came back home from office one day, and she told me that she'd sorted Pranay's problems out. She was all of 8 years old. She'd called Faisal and enrolled both of them for theatre. And there has been no looking back. At the end of the first session, I think Pranay and Faisal's son were standing on stage and urging the audience, take our autographs, take our autographs. I don't know if you remember.
Yes.
And
they were again in this Alibaba.
Yes.
They were the thieves in Alibaba, both of them.
Yes.
40 thieves, yes.
Yes. And today he's an actor. So from the days from a very, very shy, introverted child, he is an expressive adult who is confident enough to go in front of the camera or on the stage at any time. And so I personally know how theatre actually benefits kids. But one of the questions I'd like to ask you is, theatre is all very well, but parents are always very worried about education. So what are the goals for theatre in the CBSE syllabus?
Well, CBSE has introduced it some years ago, and I'm happy to say that between Barry John, Maya Rao, Abdul Latif from NST and myself, we helped them devise, along with NCRT, of course, a syllabus for it. And some schools have plunged into it. Not a large number, but we have a range of schools across India. So I just shared 3 of the very major goals we have. That why do we have theatre? It's the beginning of their write-up on it. I think the first goal they see for theatre is to reflect upon ourselves. And I think this example I just gave, Alpna, of this Padhai, Pesha, Parents, Peers, Paisa and Pyar, as being the preoccupations of the teenage years. I think exploring this theatrically, take any of these 2 words and put them together, and there's a clash. So it could be parents and pyar, it could be paisa and parents, it could be padhai and paisa, it could be pesha, you know what I mean? And we've got an explosive situation that they all understand and are willing to explore. The second goal, they say, is to validate a sense of personal identity and worth. And here I think, again, I shared with you some wonderful examples: bullying, cheating, and I think the big issue that we face as a society these days, no time for grandparents. Maybe it's different now in the COVID ka zamana, but actually the child's guilt very often or not wanting to spend the time with the grandparents. So the second goal of CBSE being to validate a sense of personal identity and worth. Okay. And the third goal they put down very beautifully is to change and reinforce attitudes. I think I would approach this in an interesting way. I did this for the Cbse. I was the keynote speaker for a particular seminar. And I just picked 2 newspaper items that have caught all our imaginations in the last month and a half. One, of course, is to use as a starting point something straight out of the paper. So I use this one of this beautiful story of this young girl who we all know actually cycled maybe 350 miles with her father sitting on the pillion. And then we just started deconstructing this story and seeing what was happening here. What were the various themes? Was it about gender? Was it about privilege? Was it about getting home? Was it about the parent being dependent on the child rather than the other way around? And more recently, with the kids who work with me, I would explore, just with the idea of changing and reinforcing attitudes, this delightful news item that I read last week on this man in Delhi who's gone and changed his name to James Bond. Okay? Now, why is a very ordinary man, his name is Vikas, whatever, Khitrapal or something, I'm just guessing, and he wants to change his name to James Bond. And his wife is reacting very strongly, saying, if you're divorced, you do something like that. But he's gone to the Aadhaar office. His friends, some are delightful, some think he's crazy. But all the question raised about identity, about being a non-entity in society, about wanting to be unique. It's in a world of social media. It's in a world of TikTok. It's in a world of instant fame and gratification. It's a man's sense of self or the lack of a sense of self. So in any theme that we pick up, and believe you me, I pick up so much stuff just from little items in the Times of India, which is my paper of choice, and use it. We used a delightful one, a delightful story the other day of there's actually a teddy bear lost and found in Heathrow Airport. And the children, how they explored this theme, you know, a whole room just full of teddy bears which have been lost. And so many things came out of that, very powerful and thought-provoking kind of things. So just, I think CBSE understands it is a very powerful tool. And as we all know now, the weightage in school is really you're supposed to do 20% through school in the arts. And I know Delhi administration schools are focusing a lot on just art appreciation and learning the arts, both the aspects. So both learning an art, maybe a music or dance or painting or batik or whatever, and also learning how to appreciate and become some kind of a rasik maybe of the arts. Yeah. I think these are the goals in the CBSE list. Yeah.
Okay, I'm just looking at the questions that have come up, and one of the Bangalore teachers has come up with something which is kind of related. It goes, how can theatre bring about positive changes in education and society? So I think you've covered quite a bit of it, but you want to talk a little bit about how it can actually bring about?
I think that's a beautiful topic, and I'd like to share a huge initiative that I was asked to lead in Delhi, maybe about over 10 years, so 12 years ago. You know, it was a big problem that we were facing in the opening years of the century of these falling female ratios and the huge amount of female feticide. And UNFPA of all the agencies invited me, Ina, who headed it. She said, will you run a theatre project on this? I said, sure. What's the dimension? She said, we're linking with HT. And with HT, the newspaper, if you work with them, you have to go on to some massive, massive scale. So what we did was we just invited through HT, we ran quite a large advertising campaign. And we invited schools to get back to us, Alpna, with ideas for a script on female feticide to be presented by kids classes. I think we took 8 and 9. Those were our age group. So kids, maybe about 13 and 14-year-olds. And we got 125 little synopses, just 7, 8, 9 synopsises. And me and my team, I had 2 people working with me on that. We looked through all the synopsises and we did a first workshop where we were just inputting them on the issue of female feticide. And you know, the highest feticide in Delhi, you'll be horrified, in India, one of the highest statistics is actually in South Delhi, where you and me both live. It's one of the highest rates of
horrifying.
Feticide. Horrific. And so we interacted with the kids, with selected kids, and then selected kids means 2 kids from each school. So we did a number of workshops. And then they went back and wrote their own script. And then the scripts came back to me, and plowing through 125 scripts, I selected 50. And then these 50 schools were required to produce this play, which was between 10 and 15 minutes long, all movement sequence, some of them done entirely in movement. And they were to present them in school. And then they were to do a show of it in school, to which I would go and give them further inputs. And they were to refine it and then do it another time around. So the school itself got exposed thrice to each play on female feticide that they had produced. So straight away, 50 schools, we were reaching more than 50, 60,000 children straight off. And then as the next step from there, we did zonals. So all these 50 plays got seen by senior theatre people and teachers and selected. And the best 5 or 6 or 7 came together for a beautiful function on the 14th of November on Children's Day. And I must say the plays were so powerful. Any social attitude that you had towards feticide would totally change by experiencing this very powerful messaging by 13 and 14-year-olds. I remember this movement piece, which opened with these kind of encased cocoons of unborn children speaking to us, embryos who were going to be aborted speaking to us as an audience. I remember another hysterically funny one of an India in the future where there were only men. And in this entire family, the father, the 3 sons, and the grandchildren are all trying to marry this one woman because there are no other women available. And then I developed into a further project, which Pranoy Roy was fascinated by, that I did in Jaipur with the Samai Mansingh School. And we made films around a similar theme. And such beautiful films were made by these kids, all in school, 14-year-olds, but really exploring the theme of female feticide, debating, discussing, and there was some change occurring right there in those rooms. Yeah.
That sounds, I think the world needs a lot more theatre then. Okay, now I've got a down-to-earth question again from Bangalore. With the usual challenges of curriculum, syllabus, and time, we now have social distancing and online classes. Now, how can theatre be improvised for effective teaching in these times?
Okay, I think it's a beautiful question. I've addressed it a lot in the last 1 month when I've restarted my theatre classes, which used to, of course, be face-to-face in the best possible way, as Alpna shared. Her son was with me many, many years ago doing this. But we decided to just create theatre largely through puppetry with improvised objects. So I just like to share with you, for instance, I just decided to take a hanger on which you put clothes. I don't know if this is very clear to you because it's just a wire hanger. You can see which perhaps was like this earlier. And I've kind of pushed it like this. And I've made this into a puppet. Okay. So I'm going to put eyes here and a mouth. I want you to visualize it. And I'm just going to use it with my hand. And between this head and this hand, I'm going to create the interplay of a character. So all the children working with me at present, they're about, in all, we have about 18 of them in 2 age groups, are just using things from home. So very innovatively with clothes pegs, very innovatively with sanitizer bottles, which you all seem to have a lot of at the present at home. They've created beautiful puppets, tiny scale puppets, and we're going to do a final presentation on the 31st of this month on exactly this platform on Zoom for the parents and interested other educators, but just using objects found around the house and transforming them through very simple craft initiatives into puppets and story making and storytelling and object theatre in a very interesting way. So one child is going to tell a story as they cut paper. Okay, they cut a figure and then they show the paper, the person, and then they have an accident, they tear it in half, and in that way the story develops. So I think adapting ourselves in this age of social distancing and teaching over this online kind of medium as we are just now, there are huge new possibilities that perhaps we've never explored earlier, of a very intimate kind of communication between the viewer and the viewed.
Mm-hmm. Sounds excellent for kids who have internet connection and devices.
That's right.
And I'm going to take this opportunity to ask all our listeners, if you have a spare phone, if you have a spare tablet, you know where you have to send it. If it's working, definitely send it to us, because our children really need it. We have the talent, now we need the means. Okay, so which brings me to a question from Anchal, also related, from Delhi. How can teachers who are not trained in theatre and dramatics contribute in this activity? Will we write plays on the subjects and topics?
I think it's not a question of, you writing the play. I think it's a question of facilitating the child to write their own material. So I never write a play for children. I've written, very few people say we want to do a collection of your children's plays. I said there are 2. In 40 years of working with kids, I've written 2 scripts, and with real coercion, which have been done in many places, those particular scripts. But I think, like I shared just now, you just take a small news item that you feel has got a dramatic kind of a conflict, 2 ideas hitting their heads against each other, and you start discussing it with your students. And all the various dimensions come up. For instance, there was a fascinating news item that a school in England had created a room where if teachers were really angry, they could go and smash up furniture so that they were not smashing up the child in the classroom, And what the kids did with that was so poignant and beautiful and thought-provoking. So my belief is, don't write the play. Let the children themselves create their own materials, and you will get lovely material. Certainly, you do not need to be a drama teacher. I think I gave examples of the bullying incident. You can just place a chair and get all their ideas focused onto it. You can just use an object. You can just tell a little story. You can just write a diary entry. You can find a poem that has moved you and got you thinking, and use it at the start of, a theatrical journey. So don't worry if you don't have drama training. It's not important. It's not you who's performing, it's the child.
I know, the focus has to shift, yes.
Yes. Completely.
Okay, this is an interesting one. Theatre is a powerful medicine for teenagers. How can theatre take the stage today and have teenagers come to grip with their emotions?
I think it's a beautiful thing, and I think I've explored this a lot in much of my theatre work. I think it's always at the top of every principal's mind, the issues that come up in school these days of discipline or of dating or of the kind of expensive phones the children are bringing to school. So many issues are there. And as I say, I have my wonderful history of the 6 P's, Alpna. So I use them ad nauseum, and kids really resonate. They say, oh my God, this is really it. That we're spending so many hours studying, and then the parent wants this, and the teacher wants this, and the pressures that they feel. So very much explore with the teenager their own world on their own terms. And I think to enter into the teenager's world is a very crucial part of theatre. I gave this lovely example when we had a dry run of this morning. Mrs. Kalsi said how to get into kids so easily. And I said, whatever the age of the kid, I don't know them at all when I work with them very often in the school. We start by chatting, and I just start like, what's really hassled you about parents in the last week, and what have you enjoyed, and what have you done today, and what have you eaten before coming to school, which, as we all know these days, 80% don't eat anything. They come to school totally khali pet, and that's a huge issue with getting through the school day. And then I share, well, my breakfast today was 3 fried cockroaches. And I say just like this. And the child, who's about 3.5 or 4, first they think, and they start laughing, and they say, you're crazy. You can't be eating cockroaches. And we're on the same plane. So I've broken that barrier between the teacher and the taught. I'm sitting on the ground with the kids in a huge big circle. However many the kids may be, 100 kids also, we are in one huge circle in the same plane. And
I've seen that.
So many kids call me Mr. Cockroach. So I go through many schools with, hello, Mr. Cockroach, and I'm fine with that. Because it's just an equalizer. As when I did theater with some kids in America, I told them that I speak very good English because I used to travel to school every morning on the back of a snake. First they'd stop and think, is he for real? They'd say, you're talking rubbish. I said, yes, this is the arena to talk rubbish. But remember, if you're doing theater in school, find some place which you can make a lot of noise, because theater needs a lot of noise, a lot of confusion, and through the chaos will come some real beauty. So enjoy this process. Okay, are we good?
Thanks,
Alpna?
Faisal.
You're welcome.
I can see a lot of quick Q&As about how can I enroll my child in online theatre classes, but I think we can take that on another forum.
Yes, we can take
Thank
that
you
on
so
another
much.
forum. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes,
Thank you.
I think you have inspired our teachers.
Great. That was the idea. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think we're going to have some closing talk by Dilruba, I think.
Okay, lovely. Wonderful.
Dilruba, will you be doing the closing remarks? Oh dear, I think she's not hearing me.
I think they're all, she's around here, but I'm sure
Yes, I can see her.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think I'll do the closing remarks.
Okay. Okay.
Oh, is there? So what I have figured is that the teachers have to use a little bit of their imagination and take each situation as it comes and then apply theatre there. So if your child is confused about some concept in math, or it's something in history which nobody's understanding, just give those creative cells a little bit of a shake and plan a sort of a theatre interaction around it. And from what you tell me and what I've seen in the past, I think what the teachers need to do is just let the children come up with the answers.
Absolutely.
And the scripts. Let them do the hard work.
Yeah, that's right. I think you just have to facilitate that process, Alpna. And I think Mrs. Kalsi is turning on a video, so we can just chat till she comes back online. Yeah. So people, if you like, you can just directly email me. I'm Faisal Alkazi at Rediff Mail, in case you want to get in touch with me directly. And here we have Mrs. Kalsi back. Yeah.
Back.
Go ahead. I think you're still on mute, Mrs. Kalsi. You need to unmute yourself.
Okay. So sorry for that technical glitch. Thank you so much, Faisal, for a very informative, enthralling, exciting evening. Today's webinar was a great learning experience. And you've told us how to harness the power of theatre in classroom transactions, theatrical activities to make a science lesson appealing and enjoyable, the way you demonstrated how the children got into the solar system and made the lessons so interesting. And you've also told us how to integrate disability in the curriculum and make education more inclusive. Your improvisation of the hanger into a puppet, I thought was amazing. So that's a reflection of your ingenuity. And I'm sure your children learn a lot from your workshops, and the fact that they take the liberty of calling you Faisal. I know that you're more of a friend than an instructor to them. Your discussion and all you told us about bullying, stealing, and female feticide, I think is so relevant in today's context, because there's so much of bullying in school, and a lot of it gets unnoticed, and it's normally the person, the child who's being bullied is who becomes the victim. But actually, in my opinion, it's the bully who actually needs to be addressed, because that child has gone off the track somewhere. And what do? We just reprimand the child. So the way you address these issues, I think, has been a great learning experience for all of us. And I'm sure our teachers will capitalize on it. We look forward to your visit to the Vidya School and introducing our teachers to theatre and education. I've been very passionate about it, you know, and I want to carry this forward and introduce it in the Vidya School. So we look forward to your visit, and I hope it happens very soon. Thank you so much, Faisal, once again. And thank you to all the attendees who attended this webinar today. Take care, stay safe. Namaskar.